Hi, I'm Joanne Fastoff, and welcome to How to Write Stuff Better. Hello, everyone. Welcome to How to Write Stuff Better. I'm Joanne Fastoff. Do you have that cup of coffee or do you have that glass of wine? Whichever one you need, okay? Let's get comfortable. Today, we're going to talk about point of view versus perspective. So, we use the terms perspective and point of view interchangeably, but there's a big difference. The point of view is the narrator telling the story. Perspective is how the character processes the story and what's happening in the story. So in other words, the point of view is who tells the story, and perspective is how they describe the story. And there are several avenues of point of view. One is the first person, which means I am telling the story. Next is the second person, which means the story is being told to me. And the third person is the limited and all-knowing, and that's usually the author. Now, I like to write in the third person because I write a lot of characters. So when I have this large cast of characters and complex plots, it's challenging to manage from the first person point of view. So writing in the third person allows me to move about my characters as needed. Now, if we want to talk about the point of view, I'm telling the story. But if we want to talk about perspective, it's everybody else telling it. Example, in The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy was the point of view. But what about the perspective of the Wicked Witch of the West? What about Snow White from one of the seven dwarfs' perspectives? What about the Last Mohican from his point of view? And of course, Ramsay's perspective, since everyone knows that Moses had a point of view. And see, then there's the naive narration, which usually means the first person. For example, in J.D. Salinger's book, Catcher in the Rye, Holden Caulfield is a young person narrating his life in adult terms. In other words, his point of view is the book. In his book, Invisible Man, Ralph Ellison used an unnamed narrator under the guise of autobiography. In Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird, Scout Finch is an adult narrating about her childhood and her white attorney father representing a black man in a southern court against a white woman that accused him of rape. That's a big one. Now, the unreliable narration is always a character delivering more than the role should provide. For instance, in F. Scott Fitzgerald's book, The Great Gatsby, Mike Carraway is unreliable because he says at the beginning that he's above talking about others, yet he talks about every single person in the book. Of course, this is from his point of view, but those are perspectives. Okay, here's another example. 4 people go to the same event, yet each one comes back with a unique set of information about how they saw that event and how they dealt with being in that event. And I guarantee you that that's the perspective. And you know the cliche, his story, my story, the story, and all of us do not believe we're lying. That's perspective. To reiterate, the point of view is always the person that saw it. You are telling me what you saw would make me the second person. The third person is he or she or him or her or the all-knowing person, and that's usually the author. And the author can give a perspective for every person. The caution is that you sound like the same person for all the characters. You're not all-knowing, just all-telling. So it can become challenging when you're writing and you say, I want this guy to sound different than this woman, even though it's your voice. So the point of view as the second person is you telling me the story. Third person, the limited one, is about them. You must be very careful because if you're the story's narrator, you must be consistent. And the reader has to know the differences in the voices. In his book, The Christmas Story, Gene Shepard is an adult narrating when he was a kid and wanted a Red Ryder BB gun. I know you've all seen this. As an adult, he's telling the story about himself as a kid. So you hear his voice understand the genre, and know that that voice is different than when his father is cussing and his mom breaks the father's leg lamp. And for those who have yet to read or see The Christmas Story, you need to run and get it. And did you know The Christmas Story was initially titled In God We Trust, All Others Pay Cash? Now, active versus passive tone, I put the link down below. Okay, so now we're writing supporting characters. A set of characters is an essential element in your story. Now, while the plot is necessary, the setting, key point of view, and theme are required. However, none of these story elements rank above character. There are 4 distinct types of characters. The first one is the dynamic character, who undergoes a critical interchange, such as a change in personality or attitude. And one of the best examples is Ebenezer Scrooge. And we all know what he went through. He was one kind of character at the beginning of the story, and he became a different kind of character in the end. The flat character is a 2-dimensional character who has no inner depth. This character says things because it's probably what's needed, but they don't need to say them. For example, a police officer walks into the police station and says, "Captain, the perps have been caught and they've been apprehended at State and Madison." Flat character, no inner depth. And the third character is the static character. When you meet this character, he's the same as when you leave him. So if we go to the Bible, Pharaoh is one of the best static characters. He's the same when we meet him, and he's the same when we leave him. The fourth character is the round character, a character that's a mess. And this character pulls the story together. Now, if it's written correctly, this person can seem more real than anybody we see on the street. Prolific author James Baldwin always seems to describe characters that have so much depth that you say, "I know this person. He's writing about my next door neighbor or the person down the street or one of my cousins." This is a round character. And all 4 aspects are needed in your story, but the rounded character is the one we will follow the most. Now, another thing to consider when you're writing fiction, and I'm talking fiction, is that writers use themselves as an example for the main character in the work that they're writing. And that tends to lead to being too easy on the protagonist. That's different than a formula for an exciting story. Have you ever read a story where the protagonist goes through all kinds of problems and comes out virtually solving all the issues quickly? Okay, that story probably didn't captivate your imagination. Now think about your life when everything goes well. You seem to roll with the punches. Why mess with a good thing, right? But if the story's foundation is drama, drama spells trouble, and trouble is conflict, then the story leans heavily on the fact that the universe is out of balance and you are attempting to set it right. See, it doesn't matter whether you're successful or not. If the world is out of balance, life has to be wrong, which means your character has to undergo the worst thing possible, and then something even worse happens after that. The real story is how the character reacts to it. One of my literary heroes, Walter Mosley, loves to write a problem and then deepens the issue before it's resolved. It takes you up and down emotionally, and you're exhausted after reading one of his Easy Rawlins mysteries, right? But you love them, and the writing is fantastic. Now, sometimes when I write, I find myself surprised at the actions of one of my characters, and that tells me that I'm on the right track. For example, in my book, The Smoke Ring, my protagonist, FBI Special Agent in Charge Howard Watson, picks up a baseball bat and is about to pounce on 2 pieces of trash that did bodily damage to 2 of his agents. However, one of his supporting characters, FBI Special Agent Janet Forrestal, takes the bat from him. And when I was writing this passage, I wanted to beat the hell out of these 2 guys for what they did to the agents. And then I realized that Howard Watson wanted to do the same thing, but couldn't. So I refrained from letting him do that. He surprised me because I would have gone through with it, but Howard Watson is still a professional. I've written for the New York stage on Off Broadway, so as a playwright, I utilized the techniques of the Stanislavski method. And he was a great Russian actor and teacher and advocated the sense of relaxation imagination and memory, which is the practice of not acting out a scene, but living it through the recollection of sensory detail. For example, you write that your character is upset. Now, except for writing that emotion, how will your reader know how upset this person is? Did she slump on the ground in the corner and place her head in her hands? Or could she not stop the flow of tears? Or did she bang on the table repeatedly with her fist until her tears made her stop? The Stanislavski method has helped me tremendously as a mystery and intrigue writer. So my protagonist, Howard Watson, is always searching for inner motives to justify others' actions, what the characters seek and what they're trying to achieve. That's very hard, so I deal with a lot of action. In my book, The Smoke Ring, my antagonist, Onela Katenta, feels justified in killing. Howard Watson feels her pain because, do you see where I'm going with this? The secondary, or as I like to call it, supporting character, almost always interacts with the protagonist on some level. It could be through dialogue or a memory that the protagonist has about this character. In my book, The Standing People, FBI Special Agent Ahmad Waverly tells another agent about his relationship with Howard Watson, which is how we find out little bits and pieces about Howard Watson, because the secondary character or supporting character knows these things. The best way to broaden your story and increase the conflict is to use more than one antagonist. In my book, The Pact, 3 women share the minor antagonist character alongside the primary antagonist character, a drug-dealing, cold-blooded killer. So even though they might not be the primary antagonist, we tend not to dislike them as much as we hate the main antagonist. Supporting characters serve one purpose: to develop the protagonist. They aren't just background noise, because each supporting character gets to put up some resistance to the protagonist. For example, in The Standing People, Howard Watson has gotten his butt kicked royally, and his supporting character, CIA officer Li Ling Zhu, saves his hide. I won't tell you how. You have to read my book, okay? And just go to JoanneFastdog.com. You'll find out. So cut down your list of secondary characters so that each is entirely different from any other character in the story. And each figure should be defined uniquely. And by that way, you need to give each secondary character a different name. So forget the names Maria and Mary and Jimmy and Johnny. It won't work. In my first book, The Gordian Knot, I couldn't think of any name to use besides George. And that didn't help my editor when figure out which George is which George. So I had multiple Georges in my story. You won't see it because she caught the duplicates. And if you need help with names, there's a great website called BehindTheName.com. And that website is going to state where a name originates and possibly any meaning. So you might not think this is important, but it is, especially if you're dealing with a foreign name, a word you like that sounds good. See, I always thought the first name Howard was solid, and it didn't hurt that I had a massive crush on a guy named Howard in high school. So I looked up the name Howard. It's the surname of a British noble family, so I was safe. You want your secondary character to be liked or disliked by your reading audience. If they're hated, your audience will read them more, but probably only in that one story. The secondary character is the person that runs with you and has your back. So in my Howard Watson mysteries, it's Tim Yamamoto and Ahmad Waverly. The protagonist is the character whose story we're following. In Thomas Harris's book, The Silence of the Lambs, Clarice Starling is the protagonist, and Jack Crawford, her FBI boss, is considered the secondary character. Of course, Dr. Lecter is the primary antagonist, and Buffalo Bill is the secondary antagonist. Does the supporting character always agree with the protagonist? No. The Silence of the Lambs movie is 2 hours long, but Dr. Lecter's character is only in it for 16 minutes. 16 minutes. He is in 1/8 of the movie, but leaves a considerable impression. And despite his brief appearances, he is a solid supporting character for Clarice Starling. And supporting characters are a big deal. And without supporting characters, our main characters would fall flat because they're alone. And as I say, no one is successful on their own, and no one goes down in flames on their own. The supporting character, whether an antagonist or a positive character, is needed, especially in print. In Callie Corey's screenplay, Thelma and Louise, Thelma is the protagonist, and Louise, although older and wiser, is the supporting character. Thelma is a dynamic character, so in the film, look at how she grows. And when we talk about supporting characters, think about your best friend. Think about your supporting character. Do you want people to like your supporting character? Do you want them to like you? Do you want people to like your supporting character more than you? No. But you want them to be enthused about them. The supporting character is there to help you. And that's the whole point of support. Supporting character is a much better word than secondary character, because a secondary character can show up for a few minutes and leave an unbelievable impression on you. That's it in a nutshell. Hey, next time we talk, balancing humor and drama. Thank you.